Everyone thought I'd break down when I got removed from the biggest project of my career. They thought I'd cry, walk out, maybe even quit the company. Instead, I smiled. Because what no one realized, not even my arrogant manager who erased me from my own work, was that I had already prepared a silent storm. And once it hit, there would be no rebuilding what I was about to destroy. My name is Delaney Cross. I'm 33 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I was the lead product manager at one of Chicago's fastest-growing tech startups. The kind of place where ping-pong tables were more common than printers, and where men in Patagonia vests casually made decisions that shaped millions of dollars. I had worked for 7 months on a revolutionary high product, managing everything from ideation to testing. I pitched the idea, led the sprints, and built the team. It was my baby, my work, my vision. But a week before our investor presentation, I was blindsided. My manager, Travis, a man who had spent most of his career talking over women in meetings, called me into a meeting room with floor-to-ceiling glass walls, the kind that made every humiliation visible. He didn't yell. He didn't insult. He simply said, "We've decided the investors would respond better to a more seasoned male presence. You'll still be thanked in the footnotes." Footnotes. 7 months of sleepless nights and prototypes reduced to a footnote. I remember sitting there frozen, my hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my skin. Travis was already halfway through drinking his overpriced kombucha, moving on as if I didn't matter. But here's the thing about me. I don't scream. I don't throw things. I don't even argue. I document. And what I had documented in the last 7 months would become the downfall of Travis Langston and the company he built his ego inside of, because I had kept emails, screenshots, voice recordings, calendar invites, task breakdowns, and when the time came, I'd present a truth so undeniable, so professionally devastating, that even his charm wouldn't save him. "You erased me from the project, Travis, so I'll erase you from this industry." After that meeting, I didn't go back to my desk. I went straight to the rooftop. The wind was sharp, biting against my skin. I remember standing there with the whole city of Chicago spread out below me, glass, steel, and ambition, and I made a promise to myself. If they wanted war cloaked in professionalism, then that's exactly what I'd give them. No screaming, no scenes, just precision, just justice. I knew how men like Travis operated. He thrived on plausible deniability. Everything he said was always just vague enough, polite enough, safe enough to avoid accountability. He didn't tell me I was incompetent. He just kept leaving me out of emails. He didn't yell. He just rescheduled meetings without me. He didn't fire me. He just made me irrelevant. But I had already started archiving everything long before I was erased, not because I knew this would happen, but because I had seen it happen to other women before me. There was Mia from marketing, who led a successful campaign only to watch it get handed off to the VP's nephew. There was Priya from QA, who trained the guy that eventually replaced her. And Rachel, who simply disappeared one day without explanation. No send-off email. No goodbye lunch. I wasn't going to be next. That night, I went home, ordered takeout, and spread everything across my dining table. Emails showing I initiated the project. Meeting notes with my handwriting. Screenshots of Slack messages where Travis approved my prototypes. Voice memos of team syncs where he praised my ideas, the same ones he'd later claim as his own. I created a folder, password protected. I named it The Erasure of Delaney Cross. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it, but I knew I was going to do something. What Travis didn't realize was that I was more than just a project manager. I was a strategist, a builder. I didn't just plan product rollouts. I planned contingencies. I anticipated failure points, and this time, the product was him. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. I smiled. I complimented people's outfits. I asked about weekend plans. I was calm, collected, invisible by design, because the most dangerous people are the ones you don't see coming. And I was about to become a ghost in Travis's machine, a ghost with a plan. The first rule of strategic revenge? Don't rush. If you strike too early, they recover. If you strike too late, they forget. You have to hit them exactly when their guard is down, when they believe they've won. And Travis Langston, he was already celebrating. By the following week, he'd taken full ownership of the AI project. His LinkedIn had a smug new update: leading innovative machine learning solutions at the frontier of fintech disruption. The man couldn't even explain what an API was 3 months ago. Now he was a pioneer. I sat back and watched as he began the investor pitch tour. Seattle, Boston, smiling in recycled tech bro hoodies, rehearsing my script. I knew every line of that presentation because I had written it. And it was so specific, so personally stylized, that I could trace every word back to me like a fingerprint. But I wasn't here to argue authorship. I was here to end him. Step 1. Find his weaknesses, not professionally. Personally, I started discreetly mapping his relationships inside the company. Who he trusted, who he underestimated, who owed him favors, who resented him but stayed silent. I wasn't looking for allies. I was looking for leverage. And that's when I found James, our junior product analyst, quiet, brilliant, underpaid, and overlooked. Just like I had once been, James had flagged a major data issue in one of Travis's test reports, one that Travis ignored and swept under the rug to keep timelines tight. The issue: our AI product's credit scoring system had a bias problem. It was disproportionately flagging applicants from certain zip codes, a serious liability. If discovered, it could mean lawsuits, bad press, and regulatory scrutiny. James had warned him in writing. Twice, Travis had replied, "We'll optimize post-launch. Don't kill momentum." That was mine. I approached James with caution. I didn't ask him to betray anyone. I just asked him to talk, and when he realized I already knew, he broke. He showed me the reports, the timestamps, the ignored warnings. I didn't need to hack anything. I didn't need to manipulate him. I just needed to listen. I added it all to the folder. Then I smiled, the kind of smile that only comes when you know you've got the checkmate in hand. But the game's still being played. The AI project was scheduled to go live in 2 weeks. Right after a final investor summit in San Francisco. Travis had no idea I was coming. And I wouldn't be bringing revenge. I'd be bringing a reckoning. 2 weeks. That's all I needed. The countdown had started the moment Travis booked his one-way flight to San Francisco, where the investor summit would be held. An event that could make or break the company's valuation. Millions on the line. Careers at stake, including his. And he had no idea the foundation beneath him was already crumbling. I didn't intend to destroy the company. Not yet. My goal was simpler. Destroy him first, then let the rest collapse like a dying star. I began with the softest, most overlooked weapon in any professional arsenal. The paper trail. Anonymous packets were mailed, one to the company's legal department, one to our, and one, my favorite, to the lead investor hosting the summit. Each contained copies of internal emails showing Travis ignoring James's bias reports, data logs with timestamps, meeting notes where I had been erased, and screenshots of Travis plagiarizing my work. I included no commentary, just facts, just evidence, just enough to raise eyebrows, but not enough to be dismissed. Then came the final phase: exposure. The night before the summit, I uploaded a simple Medium article under a pseudonym, no names, no direct accusations, just a story titled, "What Happens When Women Build and Men Take Credit." A case study in quiet erasure. It spread like wildfire in the local tech circles: founders, developers, journalists, VC assistants. Everyone was suddenly whispering about a Chicago startup scandal and wondering which golden boy it was. I watched a buzz build while sipping wine from my apartment balcony. Calm, poised. I hadn't said a word publicly, but the echo of truth was already too loud to ignore. By the time Travis took the stage in San Francisco, I knew 2 things. He had no idea the leak came from inside. He would step into that spotlight thinking he was untouchable, but when he opened his mouth to present, the first investor interrupted him. "Before we start, I'd like to clarify something about your credit scoring model. There are serious questions regarding bias indicators. Do you deny that your team received prior internal warnings? Travis blinked twice. His hands, usually confident, fumbled with the clicker. We're working on optimization. Even though your analyst flagged the issue months ago. Silence. A brutal, beautiful silence. His face drained of color. And in that moment, the man who erased me, the one who walked through glass offices like he was a god, realized he was nothing but a footnote in my story. The fallout was instant. Within 24 hours of the summit confrontation, whispers turned to meetings, and meetings turned to panic. Investors pulled back. Internal Slack channels lit up like wildfire. And Travis? He vanished, not literally, but his presence at the company evaporated. He canceled his return flight, didn't respond to messages. His calendar showed out of office, but everyone knew the truth. He was scrambling, hiding, trying to contain a narrative that was never his to control. Meanwhile, the legal team began a formal inquiry. They launched a compliance audit, digging into product development records. And that's when they found it: the bias reports, the ignored warnings, the manipulation of testing metrics to make the algorithm seem cleaner than it was. James was quietly interviewed, then reassigned to a special oversight committee. No one questioned why. And me, I stayed silent, just like I always had. But now, silence didn't mean invisibility. People began stopping me in the hallways. "Hey, Delaney, just wanted to say, that Medium article really hit home. Whoever wrote it, they nailed it. If you ever want to grab coffee, I'd love to hear your thoughts on inclusive design. We're building something new." Doors were opening. Doors I had once been shut out of by men like Travis. But I wasn't done. See, justice isn't just about watching your enemy fall. It's about reclaiming your space and making damn sure they never steal it again. I uploaded a second post, this time under my real name. It wasn't about Travis. It was about systems, culture, the unseen labor of women in tech, the cost of being erased. The article went viral in our industry. I received interview requests, panel invitations, and one call in particular I hadn't expected. The board chair of our company. She asked to meet. I showed up to the coffee shop cautious, but calm. She didn't waste time. "We want to talk about your vision, not just for the product, but for the future of this company." For the first time in my career, I was being asked to lead, not to support, not to assist, not to quietly contribute in the background. To lead Travis. Word around the industry was that he was taking time off, unofficially blacklisted, quietly avoided, the same way women had been for decades after being too emotional or difficult. Only now, it was his turn to be whispered about. He had become what he feared most: forgettable. The offer came 1 week later. An executive role. Official title: Head of Ethical Innovation. And officially, the woman who survived the fire and rebuilt the damn building. I didn't accept immediately. I wasn't interested in being a poster child for redemption. I needed guarantees, power, autonomy. So I negotiated. I wanted full hiring control for my department, budget authority, and a seat in executive strategy meetings, not as a courtesy invite, but with voting power. To their credit, the board said yes. I walked into my new office with the same energy I walked onto that rooftop weeks ago. Focused, sharp, ready. But here's the thing about taking power after being erased: it changes how you see everything. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted infrastructure. The first person I hired was James. I made him lead architect on a fairness auditing tool. We were building software designed to flag data bias before a product ever made it to users. Something Travis would have laughed at. Something the future would demand. Then came Priya, Rachel, Mia, the women who had been passed over, pushed aside, forgotten. I didn't just bring them back. I gave them their own teams, and as the department grew, so did our influence. Soon, engineers were looping us in from day one. Product launches were filtered through our lens. Legal teams asked for our insights before approving models. We weren't just cleaning up messes anymore. We were preventing them. And word got around. Other companies started calling. "How are you structuring this? Can we borrow your framework?" Would Delaney be open to speaking at our conference? I didn't respond to all of them, but the ones I did, I made sure they understood. This isn't charity. This is necessity. You either build ethically, or you break. As for Travis, I saw him once, months later, at a networking event downtown. He was standing alone near the bar, pretending to check his phone. He looked thinner, grayer. His laugh, the one that used to fill glass conference rooms, was gone. He didn't see me, or maybe he did, but knew better than to speak. I walked past him with a quiet pride, not because I had crushed him, but because I had survived him and turned his attempted erasure into the foundation of something bigger. He took my project. He tried to take my voice. So I took his relevance and built a legacy in its place. I never set out to become a symbol. I just wanted credit, respect, a seat at the table I helped build. But once you survive a system designed to shrink you, something inside you refuses to shrink again. You expand. And that's exactly what I did. My team became the most requested unit in the company. Not because we made people comfortable, but because we made products safer, stronger, defensible. VCs started asking about our review process during funding rounds. Partners started demanding our sign-off before launching collaborations. We had become the backbone of trust in a world where trust was currency. And me? I wasn't just in boardrooms. I was shaping them. Every time I sat across from an exec who used to call me emotional, I didn't raise my voice. I raised my metrics, impact reports, retention charts, positive press reach. I proved that ethical leadership wasn't a soft skill. It was a business model. But the world doesn't change just because you survive it. It changes because you rebuild it louder, smarter, stronger than the men who burned it down. So I did what Travis never could. I mentored every quarter. I hosted a reclaim room, a private forum for mid-career women in tech who had been dismissed, overlooked, or quietly pushed out. Not to vent, to strategize. We didn't whisper anymore. We documented. We amplified. We sent our summaries directly to hiring directors. We connected names to open seats before the recruiters even posted them. I used to think revenge was the endgame. Now I knew better. Revenge is just a fire. The real power is what you build from the ashes, and in every conversation, every closed door meeting, every executive decision, I brought that fire with me. Not to burn down, to light the way. That's when the email came. From a Fortune 100 CEO. She'd read my articles, seen our framework, and she wanted a meeting. We've been trying to clean our product pipelines. We're looking for a chief integrity officer. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I realized this wasn't about me anymore. This was about creating a new standard. The kind of legacy that outlasts stories like Travis's. The kind that outlasts revenge. I took the meeting, not because I wanted the job, but because I wanted to see how far the ripple had gone. Their offices were glass and marble, sunlight pouring in like they had nothing to hide. But I knew better. Every company has a Travis. Some just learn to decorate them better. The CEO was sharp, polished, and tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of putting out fires instead of changing the architecture that breeds them. We've lost 2 major partnerships in the past year over bias concerns, she said bluntly. Our investors want transparency. Our consumers want accountability. And frankly, we want someone like you before the government decides to tell us what to do. I didn't blink. This wasn't about flattery. This was survival. They weren't hiring me because they believed in the cause. They were hiring me because I had become the cause, and that meant I had leverage. I gave them a proposal not for a title, but for an overhaul. I wouldn't come in to clean. I'd come in to build independent auditing access, total hiring autonomy, a direct reporting line to the board, not the CEO. The room went quiet, and then she nodded. You'll have it. I walked out of that meeting not as a new employee, but as a quiet revolution, because for every woman who had ever been gaslit into thinking she was too ambitious, too emotional, or too much, I had just proven that too much was exactly what the system needed. The story spread, not just in tech circles, but in media outlets. think tanks, even universities. They started calling it the Cross Standard, a framework for ethical leadership developed by someone the industry had once tried to erase. Funny, isn't it? They buried me under silence, and I came back louder than they ever imagined. Not with rage, but with receipts. Not with revenge, but with results. My inbox overflowed. Young women, older women, queer folks, people of color, all sharing the same story in different voices. They tried to shrink me too. They gave my credit to someone else. I thought I was crazy until I read your post. And that's when I knew this was no longer a chapter. It was a movement, and every time someone said my name not as a victim, but as a blueprint, Travis's shadow faded just a little bit more. They tried to silence one woman. Instead, they amplified thousands. That's the thing about systemic erasure. When it fails, the backlash isn't quiet. It's thunder. I began receiving invitations from universities, ethics panels, international tech summits. People wanted to know, how did you do it? How do we stop it from happening again? I never gave them easy answers, because there aren't any. But I gave them truth, strategy, and most importantly, proof that accountability can be engineered into power. I stood on panels next to men who used to think I belonged in our. I answered questions from executives who once laughed at diversity reports. Now they were scribbling notes. One journalist asked me during a keynote, "Don't you think it's dangerous to build a career on revenge?" I smiled, not out of malice, out of clarity. I didn't build my career on revenge, I said. I built it on return. The return of what I was owed. The return of credit, of space, of voice. If that looks like revenge to you, maybe that says more about what you were used to getting away with. The crowd went quiet, then erupted. That clip alone hit 12 million views in 48 hours. People weren't just hungry for revenge, they were starving for justice with teeth, and I had become the proof that it was possible, that one woman's refusal to disappear could rewrite the rules. Travis's name came up less and less. When it did, it was always followed by, "Isn't he the one who got dismantled by Delaney Cross?" His LinkedIn profile stayed silent. His last job ended with consulting in quotation marks. He was a ghost of a system that had failed to adapt. And me? I didn't slow down. I launched a foundation, not just for women in tech, but for anyone whose work had been taken, twisted, or trashed. We funded legal support, whistleblower protections, and educational grants for those starting late because they'd been pushed out early. It wasn't charity. It was repair. Because when the system spends years breaking people, the only revenge that matters is giving them the tools to build something better. And I had plenty of tools now. Every headline, every keynote, every invitation that once would have gone to someone with a louder tie and weaker ethics now had my name on it. Delaney Cross. Not disgruntled, not difficult, not too emotional. Just undeniable. Success doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like silence, the kind you never had before. No one talking over you. No one taking credit for your breath. Just space. For the first time in years, I had space to hear my own thoughts again. It was strange. I'd built a movement, restructured a company, destroyed the legacy of a man who once decided I was replaceable. And yet the scariest thing I'd done, sit still. One Saturday morning, I sat at the cafe near my apartment. No laptop, no press release, just coffee and quiet. A young woman approached me. She looked nervous, maybe early 20s. She held out her phone, shaking slightly. "Are you Delaney Cross?" I smiled. "Depends. Am I about to be cancelled?" She laughed, relief in her eyes. "No, you're the reason I didn't quit last year. My manager tried to erase me from a pitch I built. I watched your keynote. I stayed. I fought back. And last month, I got promoted." She showed me the email. Her name in bold. Creative lead. UX division. I didn't cry, but something in me cracked open, something I hadn't let breathe since the rooftop. It wasn't just about fixing broken systems. It was about planting things that could grow without me. That night, I went home and looked around my apartment. The awards on the shelf, the silence in the rooms, and I realized I wanted more. Not titles, not platforms. Connection. I'd been so Busy proving I belonged in those rooms, I forgot to ask if I wanted to stay in them forever. So I made a decision. I would start writing. Not memos, not frameworks, stories. Not about Travis, not even about me, about the women who never got their voice back, and the ones still trying to find it. I'd write so no one would ever have to Google, am I crazy? Or was that discrimination? Again, because survival is step one. But storytelling? That's what makes survival contagious. And I had survived long enough to know the real revenge is never needing it again. I used to think the most powerful moment of my life would be taking Travis down. I was wrong. It was this one sitting across from a room full of young women, none of whom had ever heard his name. They didn't know what I lost, only what I built. I stood at the front of a leadership retreat, no stage, no mic, no spotlight, just a circle of chairs and open notebooks. They called me a guest speaker. I called myself a survivor with a spreadsheet. We're not here to talk about how to fit into broken rooms, I told them. We're here to learn how to build better ones. They leaned in. One of them, a brilliant engineer with bright red curls and a fierceness in her voice, asked me, "But what if they still don't listen?" I paused, then smiled. Then make them watch, because that's what Travis did when he underestimated me. He watched while I dismantled his illusion of control. He watched while the industry chose transparency over charm. He watched while his name faded from memory, replaced by mine. And now, these women, they weren't just going to be heard. They were going to be followed. The media still ask me sometimes, "Do you regret how far you went?" And I always gave the same answer. I don't regret the storm. I regret that it was necessary. Because if they had just treated me fairly, I would have never needed to become a weapon. But now that I was one, I chose where to aim. And I aimed high. I donated half my consulting income to grants for first-generation women in tech. I built a free archive of contract negotiation templates, whistleblower protections, and interview debrief worksheets. And when I was offered a book deal, I didn't write a memoir. I wrote a manual. They erased me, so I built a system they couldn't ignore. It hit the bestseller list in 2 weeks. Not because it was beautifully written, but because it was finely spoken. The truth, in a language no one could misinterpret. And with every copy, every speech, every workshop, I wasn't just rewriting my story. I was handing the pen to someone else. Because real revenge isn't about what they remember. It's about what they can't rewrite even if they try. The world didn't change overnight, but it started returning my emails faster. Funny how that works. There was a time when I would draft and redraft messages for hours, trying to find a way to sound strong without sounding threatening. Now, I wrote like I walked into boardrooms, direct, deliberate, and done apologizing. The platform kept growing. Not just followers, but momentum. Other women started doing what I had done publicly, documenting workplace injustice, negotiating for full credit, launching their own ventures. I wasn't the only spark anymore. I was one of many, and nothing terrified the old guard more than women who weren't afraid to be loud and right at the same time. One day, I got a message from an executive assistant at a Fortune 100 company. They wanted me to keynote their annual leadership conference. The theme? Power Reimagined. I almost said no. Because at that point, I had everything I fought for: a thriving business, real influence, peace. And yet, a small voice inside me said, "If you stop showing up, they'll pretend you never did." So I agreed. On the day of the event, I stood backstage in a tailored navy suit. No jewelry except the watch I bought with the severance Travis once signed to make me disappear. The CEO, a woman I'd mentored quietly years ago, introduced me. Her voice shook slightly as she said, "There was a time I thought strength meant silence, but Delaney taught me that the strongest thing you can be is seen." I stepped onto the stage. Lights, applause. But I wasn't there for the noise. I was there for the message. "You don't owe the system your loyalty," I began. "You owe yourself your legacy." I didn't speak about Travis. I didn't speak about the rooftop. I spoke about what came after. How revenge becomes transformation. How loss becomes blueprint. How silence, when broken, becomes symphony. The room didn't erupt. It breathed. because they weren't just hearing a speech. They were seeing a possibility, and that was all I ever wanted. Not to be remembered for what was taken from me, but for what I refused to let die with it. I used to think the story ended when you won, but it does end. Single quotes T.it ends when you no longer need to tell it. This everything I've shared it isn't about pain. It's about proof. Proof that one woman's voice, when used with purpose, can become louder than an entire system designed to mute her. I don't know where Travis is now. I don't check. Because I stopped needing him as a reference point for my worth. His legacy ended the moment he tried to bury mine. And now, I no longer fight for a seat at their table. I build new ones longer, stronger, with room for every voice they once ignored. Some days I still feel it. The sting of old rooms, the echo of being dismissed, diminished, doubted. But then I get a message from a woman in Germany, a college grad in Detroit, a mother in Brazil, each one saying the same thing. I thought I was the only one, but now I know better. And that's the power of telling the truth out loud. It teaches someone else they're not alone. It reminds someone else they're not crazy. It dares someone else to speak. So to every woman who's been sidelined, silenced, or sabotaged, your story matters. Even if no one claps yet, even if no one believes you yet, even if no one's listening yet, because one day, someone will, and when they do, make sure you're ready to say, I didn't just survive, I rewrote the ending. If you've ever been made to feel like you were too much, too loud, too emotional, too visible, this story was for you. And if you've ever been dismissed the way I was, what would you have done in my place? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and join the women who don't stay silent anymore.